Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 40th episode of Toaster Talk on the Toast Network. We've been quiet for a bit, but we decided to come back and do a mid-season review of the season that's been so far. And there's been a lot of action off the track while everyone's on a break and get back into the season towards the end of the month with the Dutch Grand Prix. But before that, welcoming our familiar panelists on the show, Sunny and Naren. Welcome on board to yet another episode of Toaster Talk. Why don't we start around with what are like the key thoughts on your mind at this moment from a mid-season perspective? Either we can start off with on the track and then head over to some of the stuff that's happening off the track. We could probably start off with you, Naren.
Hey Vivek, thanks for having me on the show. First half of the season has been more or less um, pretty clear on who will be the world champion because of what has been happening. Now, like we were discussing in the previous shows, it's now more related to who will be the second in the drivers. At least for now, it looks even clear the second will be more or less Perez, who will be 3, 4, 5 in the drivers, who will be the second in the constructors. That being said, the second half of the season will be a little more interesting to see because McLaren upgrades have been really good and they've been consistently performing in the last two races. So is Williams upgrades. William has been very good in the last race, especially Albon was really good. Considering all that, we will definitely have an exciting second half with the likes of McLaren, also Mercedes and Williams doing their bit to trying to come up. So yeah, I'm just waiting for it the second half of the season to unfold and see and watch what is happening with all the drivers. Yeah, that's how I take.
Yeah, and I mean McLaren's getting podiums. Ferrari squeezed in a podium. Mercedes has squeezed in a podium in the last few races, so all the upgrades are sort of playing out. Sunny, how about you? What's your take on how we'll be looking at the season so far, and what would that mean going forward?
Well, yeah, Vivek, and to all of our viewers. To be honest, this season has been pretty flat. Nothing much interesting has been happening on the track and off the track, and it's for lack of a better word, maybe hurts me as well to say this, but there's really been no action. There's been very predictable. We know who's going to win even before the race begins. And to be honest, even the driver's silly season and the bickering between teams, which happened in 2021, we've seen none of that. We've seen no competitive racing at the front. Yes, okay, we've had some good midfield action, but really nobody's that bothered about the midfield. We all want to see racing at the front, but that's not happened. And so I have to say that this season has been quite flat. And worryingly still, there is no indication that it's going to change in the second half as well.
But with the tweaking of the format and stuff, any thoughts there? Like, with the whole sprint racing, S qualifying, the S sprint race. What's your take on that format?
It's good, but at the end of the day, we want to see action for the main race. We want to see teams competitive. And even Max pointed this out. We can do all of these tweaks and all of these giggles, hit and giggles. It's fine, but we're addressing the wrong problem. The main problem is the spread in performance between the teams is too wide. And that is the reason why the main racing is not so attractive and compelling. And so to try and address that, we have all of these tweaks in the sprint and all of these extra activities, but that's really not addressing the main problem. What we need to do is have competitive action and the teams bunch together. And probably we won't feel the need for all of these extra races like the sprint races, sprint qualifying, which is good. It's a great initiative, but that's not the problem.
Well, Naren, what would your take be? Like, I mean, if I think of it, if I go back to history of F1, we've always seen these periods of domination. Maybe the current domination is way, 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 way ahead of what we have seen in recent past. But in general, we've always seen phases of domination, whether it was the Mercedes domination for a bit, it was Red Bull before that, it was Ferrari before that. It's always been the case. So does F1 need to do something really drastically different to make sure, to what Sunny's point is, that cars can be bunched up?
Yeah, so I would like to add on to what Sunny was saying. What he was saying was completely true. The spread of what is happening, or the 3 different days, is most likely to fill up tickets and fill up seats. I was incidentally trying to go to the Belgian Grand Prix, and I was seeing that the ticket price in euros was somewhere around 1,500, which for 3 days too much. 1,500 euros is a little too much. That's when I understood that if you actually want to go watch a race live, which obviously is like fanlists like us will be worthwhile thing to do. It's so much expensive, and that's a way for them to cover all the costs that's been incurred by them. So I would probably say we have to bring not just rules to how the race goes. Probably you have to bring in more engineering rules so the racing is competitive. The drivers are going for the gaps, and if you see previously, the gap between the first 10 drivers is not more than 2 seconds. Now, if you see, the gap between the first and the second driver is 20 seconds, or even 30 seconds, even plus 1 lap. So that's something we have to address, and I completely agree with what Sunny was saying. So we have to probably bring in more rules to the engineering, bring in more cost cap, try to be a little strict with the rules, and also not penalize at the wrong areas.
So let me ask both of you, there was this thing called A1, started by Dubai, where they said that F1 has become more of a money bags thing. Teams with the most money, with the best cars, are winning the race, and it's not really about the best driver on the track. So they said, we are going to come up with A1 where all the cars have the same specs and the drivers have to battle it out. Now, clearly I think they did 2 seasons and then they closed out because there was not much viewership on that. But what are your thoughts if F1 were to come up with a similar rule where everyone has the same car?
Can I? Or
Please,
Yeah.
go ahead,
yeah.
Naren.
So if you have the same spec all throughout the race, and probably let's assume that it's the same spec for the next 3 years, there would be no room for innovation. There will be no room to build, to build a magnificent car like how F1 is doing, because we all know that F1 is the pinnacle of engineering progress. If you have the same car, which means that it's left to the skill of the driver alone. But if you look at a racing perspective as a whole, it's not just the driver who has to do everything. It's also the car that has to perform. And if you don't take into account the engineering prowess that is required to build a very good car, you might actually lose interest. And I was not surprised that A1 was closed down because it had no viewership. If you don't actually follow, or if you don't actually innovate, that's the same anywhere. If you don't learn, if you don't innovate, you will probably go behind the race pack and you will stay there while everyone is going forward. So that would be my take.
How about you, Sunny?
I think one of the most underrated skills of Formula One drivers is the ability to inspire the team. You see, very often we hear about driver feedback and rallying the entire engineering team to produce a car. The greatest drivers are able to do this. In fact, that is what separates the really legendary great drivers from the drivers who are not at the very top. And so if we make F1 a spec series, we are eliminating one of the most important skills of what makes an excellent driver, and that is the ability to design the car and provide the necessary feedback to those engineers. That is the reason why A1 did not work, and if we try and force it in F1, it will likely be a flop as well.
Got it. Cool. So clearly, no plans for A1. We'll stick to our F1. as we get to mid-season, there's also a lot of conversations of what the driver lineup would look like, potential changes into next season. Mid-season, we've already seen a change. And also from a driver's perspective, right? As they see the season play out, everyone's also trying to figure out their own careers. So maybe we can kind of go like constructor by constructor to just see what your thoughts are on how the teams have performed this year and what do you think are potential moves that the drivers could have, or what would their strategy be? Any thoughts that you have around it, right? So let's start from the top. Obviously, Red Bull's up there. Max has one of the longest contracts, so he's not going anywhere. And with a car like that, I don't think he'd want to go anywhere. But what are your thoughts about Checo?
May I go here?
Yeah.
Because we've spoken about it, and Red Bull was in fact my favorite team, even from 5 years back. So there's been a lot of talk about Checo Perez's form, and rightly so. Checo Perez is underperforming and this and that, which is all true. Despite that, he is second in the championship. He is still underperforming in the car and a long way behind Max. And there's a lot of should we bring in this person and that person to partner? Can you replace Checo? Now, all of this discussion is fine, but let's think about this from Red Bull's perspective. Now, from their perspective, they think we have a driver who is currently second in the championship, who is a long way behind Max. We can bring in a more competitive teammate, but that could possibly antagonize Max, and that could cause friction because then you might have teammate battle. So you'd rather have a second driver who's a long way off, behind Max, and just keep it that way. Anyhow, they're first in the championship. They're second in the championship as well in the drivers now with Checo. They're winning both championships. Why should they change? Despite Checo underperforming, from Red Bull's perspective, he's doing fine. And there's no reason for them to change.
That makes sense. Naren, anything on that? Plus, you probably talk about Mercedes.
Okay, so me being a huge Checo fan myself, seeing him rise through the ranks from being in Racing Point to being in Red Bull and competing against Max Verstappen, bringing in wins to become second in the championship is a phenomenal growth. That being said, with respect to him being a F1 driver, he's doing as much as he can to make sure that he stays on the top. He's bringing consistent podiums. Yeah, like every other driver, leaving out Max because he's in another league of his own. Every other driver he also was not consistently performing. He was good at the start. He had a very rough mid patch, and then he rose back in the ranks. So I would say Red Bull as a team is very stringent. It's cutthroat when it comes to drivers because we have already seen a lot of mid-race retirement, mid-race sacking of drivers. With Perez, it will not happen because he's still trying to climb up, even though he has his own flaws and things like that. So that being said, I would still say that Perez will still continue with Red Bull for at least 1 or 2 years until we see a dip in performance, because as age grows, you might have to find it difficult to sit in an F1 car, unlike Lewis Hamilton, who is a league of his own. So let's see. I would still say that Perez will still be there with Red Bull at least for the next 1 year. And then it's him who has to decide, or probably Helmut who has to decide. When it comes to Mercedes, now that we have one confirmed driver, obviously Russell, and the other driver is not confirmed yet. We have been having rumors that I've been seeing some news that Lewis has signed the contract for extension. Some says he has not signed still. So Lewis getting extended in F1 is still a question mark. He's also one among the greatest, but let's see who comes as a second driver. I'm still excited to see who will be, if Lewis Hamilton retires.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Lewis has not confirmed yet, but what Toto said is that in verbally, they've kind of finalized it. They just need to do some paperwork to close it out. And to your point, there were rumors that Leclerc had been reached out to in case Hamilton were to not, for them not to work out with Hamilton. But looks like they're probably just going to close the door there, and we're going to see the same team that we saw this year going up into next year and onwards. Your thoughts on that, Sunny? Along with that, we can then probably talk about another team that's done pretty well this year, especially one of the drivers from an Aston Martin perspective. And Naren, if you talk about age, he's a 42-year-old driver on the F1 track.
Yeah, so very quickly, my thoughts on Mercedes. It's very clear that Hamilton is probably going to stick with Mercedes. And seeing, oh, well, yeah, Fernando's another 4 or 5 years older than me, and he's still going strong. So why can't I do another 4 or 5 years at least, or maybe even beyond that? So that's probably how Hamilton's looking at it. So there's no reason why Hamilton's going anywhere else except Mercedes. And all of these rumors, I think, are just rumors. Probably should be just better to be ignored. Lineup. Aston Martin, Fernando is doing well over there. Despite the slight dip in performance off late, I think they might get their mojo back. It's just a matter of time. These fluctuations in performance will always happen. I think overall Fernando is happy over there, and he is thriving. In the beginning, at the beginning of the season, you could see the glow on Fernando's face, and it was really quite a story. I think that's going to continue for a while. And of course, Lance Stroll. Yeah, of course, it's a tricky one, but it's likely that Lance will definitely be staying at Aston Martin as well. Of course, we all know that his father owns the team, and that's how it is sometimes.
Yep, that it is what it is until he gets bored and he tells his dad that let's move on. But with that, Naren, let's probably move on to the other Mercedes, which is McLaren. We've had, I would say, a good jump up in the last few races with both the drivers competing for the points and the podium.
Yeah, I think if I know it correct, both the drivers have an extended contract till next year or even 2025. So in my perspective, yeah, Lando has to just do what he's been doing right now. Just stay calm on the track and do whatever he wants to. And PS3 is little more than excellent for a rookie driver, and he's actually been doing really well. Good that he did not go to Alpine and got stuck in McLaren, and so he's performing well because Alpine is nowhere near to being in the second or third. Let's see how it performs. If Zach Brown was even more was saying that he will be even focused more on the next year's car. So if the next year car is similar to what they have now, or even better, we can still see someone like PS3 going on the tops, achieving podiums. Even if not in the top of the drivers, at least in the top 10 of the drivers' points lineup. So that's something I would be exciting to see for the next year.
That makes sense, and he's been putting some pressure on Lando, at least in the last few races, whereas Lando is the more experienced driver relative to him. So I think it's an exciting space for McLaren to see both the drivers picking up with the car that they have. And like you said, if the focus into next year means an improved car, we're going to see a lot more excitement again in the middle range till everyone can pick up and catch up with Red Bull. But that brings us to the other constructor that's always started off with great optimism, but somehow managed to get back into the mid-range, and that's the red Ferrari. Sunny, what are your thoughts about Ferrari? Again, I think Leclerc has probably got the extended contract, and he's the blue-eyed boy for Ferrari. So he's going to stick around for a while. But that brings us to the question of Carlos Sainz. Sunny, I think you just gone on mute.
like you pointed out, Vivek, Leclerc is the blue-eyed boy at Ferrari. And at the moment, there are only rumors that the extended contract has been signed. Nothing has been officially confirmed or no news has been released yet. There are strong rumors, but they are rumors, and we need to take that with a pinch of salt. But we do know that Ferrari are keen to secure Leclerc services for the long term. And we also know that Sainz is signed to the end of 2024, next year. In fact, even Leclerc is signed till the end of 2024, and the extension, if any, will be beyond that. So we'll have both of them till the end of next year. So the news surrounding Leclerc is imminent. We might hear an announcement anytime soon. Now, regarding Sainz, again, these are all rumors. Like how Leclerc, the situation is all rumors. Even with Sainz, these are all rumors. But we hear, and let me confess that whatever I'm about to say, please take it with a huge tablespoon of salt. There could be a lot of truth in this, or even no truth in this. So the rumor is Leclerc is due to extend, but Sainz, we're not sure. So Sainz is looking at alternatives. And one strong possibility is the Audi team that is coming in 2026 for the next rule reset. So if Sainz goes there, then he will be with the Audi team for 2025 just to settle into the team and understand what the team is like. And then for the new rules reset in 2026, he wants to see how fast and how well Audi will do. So this is, of course, the rumor. Nothing is said yet, but this is what we have.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, honestly, even if it's a rumor, I feel like it might actually be a good move for him if he gets to be the #1 driver there. And Audi is untested at this time, so you never know where they would find themselves in the pack. But a quick wrap up of the rest of the constructors that we have. They've all had their highs this year compared to previous years. But what are your thoughts, Naren, on the whole, amongst the other constructors? What are the high points for you to look out for?
Okay, so let's quickly start with Alfa Romeo. Alfa Romeo has Valtteri Bottas contracted until 2024. Next driver is still open. We will not probably be sure if Zhou Guanyu will continue. For AlphaTauri, both the driver lineups are still open for 2024 for the 2024 season. So if both the drivers of Ricciardo and Tsunoda perform better, they are in. Else, AlphaTauri, they will sack and find new drivers. With respect to Alpine are still in a safe zone because Ocon has a contract till 2024 and Gasly has a multi-year deal. So they have been with the drivers lineup. Yes, they have been safe, but now we have some changes with the team principal and stuff like that. So I don't know what is the future for Alpine for this year and probably for the next year also. And finally, Williams, we have Albon, who has a multi-year deal, which means that the second driver, Logan Sargent, is still a question mark and we might not know what is happening. So if Sargent performs as equally as Albon, he might still have a contract. They have to improve both the car and the driver, which is said and done. But let's see. So we have a lot of drivers to be decided. So the driver lineup for 2024 will be a little too exciting.
And there's a huge pipeline of drivers who have come in and stayed out and are available in the market, just waiting for the seats to open up. Sunny, from your perspective, with the other constructors, any key highlights that you want to share? And then I want to ask you about the drama that's happening in Haas outside the track.
No, I think Naren has pointed it out very well. It's pretty much summarized everything that there is to say about the other teams at the moment.
Then I would ask you about the other drama that Haas has right now with Gunther and Haas sort of fighting it out in terms of the 50% ownership that Gunther states that he has as a co-owner, and he feels that he's being pushed out. And a lot of these conversations seem to be happening because Haas might be in the market to be sold out, and Gunther wants to make sure that he gets his 50% whenever that sale happens.
So we've only heard headline news about this. There are a lot of terms and conditions about these deals that we don't know. And it's also important to know that these contracts, right, even if there's a 50% ownership, there'll be a lot of clauses in that contract and in that shareholder agreement that we don't know. So this is one for the lawyers to analyze, and it's going to be a lengthy, drawn-out procedure before we get any kind of bottom line on this. So at the moment, I would refrain from saying anything because we haven't gone through all of the details. And even if we have gone through all the details, there'll be a lot of sub clauses that will require a lot of legal untangling before we can derive a conclusion.
But do you think it would be a good move for Haas to be like the current ownership folks to just sell out? I mean, it obviously be a good deal for them, considering the investment that they came in. And Haas came up with a smart idea, right? He didn't start from scratch. Sort of tied up with Ferrari, got all the baseline technical details, the teams, all that work out so that he didn't have to start from scratch. So I would say overall, he's got a good investment that he's brought in. And then with Gunther, with all the experience that he had and that he brought into the team, I think they've got themselves a good investment that they could potentially walk out of with the profit. But what would that mean from the sport perspective?
May I?
Yeah.
So F1 is a business, and if I was in a F1 team's team owners, not team principal, team owner, then I would consider now is the time to sell, because let us not forget that 2021 was the greatest F1 season in history, not more than 2 years back. And now we are starting to see that popularity slightly starting to wane, but it is still at an all-time high. I think the popularity of F1 is still at all-time high. Every weekend we see 400,000, 500,000 plus spectators at the venue. This is unprecedented. The number of races that we're going to every year, the popularity, DTS also behind the scenes on Netflix, the number of viewers there. This has reached, in my opinion, a euphoric level, and you always sell when the price is high.
Yep. With that, I think we're probably close to an end to our mid-season review. Like Sunny started off with, it's been business as usual for most of the year, and it might seem the same for the first spot towards the end of the year, and we're trying to just figure out like what's keeping Max pushing the limits race after race. Like, I mean, he could actually just chill and still do like a 5-second gap over the second person, but he clearly seems to be pushing it to a 20 seconds so that he can take in that extra pit stop just for the heck, so that he can get the fastest, make sure that he keeps continuing getting the fastest lap. Home ground is going to be all orange at the Dutch Grand Prix. So we know what the fans are going to be excited about, probably might hit the 500,000 mark for all you know. But once again, thanks Naren and Sunny for all your thoughts about the season so far and what we can expect into the season that's remaining and into the year that's going forward with respect to the driver move around. With that, to our viewers, thank you for listening in. It's been a long season so far, and we'd love to hear your thoughts and comments in the chat box. And if there are any topics you want us to cover, feel free to reach out, and keep listening in, share, and subscribe. With that, thanks everyone. Good evening, and see you end of the month at the Dutch Grand Prix.